Okay, so this is just an update on my thoughts regarding the situation in Turkey. It's approximately an hour since my last upload, or I should say my last recording. I don't know what time I'll be able to upload these videos. But as earlier recording indicated, it was a very confusing situation. It still is. Um, at this exact moment, it looks like the government, the Erdogan administration, has the situation under control. President Erdogan has arrived in Istanbul. He's made a speech to the nation. There's still a lot of mixed reports coming out of the country. And unfortunately, there is reports of bloodshed. This is unconfirmed. I have to emphasize that. It's unconfirmed, but there's reports that 15 police officers have been killed in Ankara. That's via CCTV, China's central television, and reports of two killed in Istanbul and clashes there. That's via the BBC. So various networks are getting different snippets of information here and there, and how much of it is actually accurate is very hard to know. Um, I have a Turkish friend. Haven't seen him for a number of years, but he has said that this is, in his opinion, it's the entire thing's been staged by Erdogan. So basically, these junior officers that have taken part in this supposed coup are scapegoats, and the whole coup is set up to actually solidify Erdogan's position. For a very long time now, Turkish liberals, moderates, secularists have been very alarmed by President Erdogan's slide towards autocracy. Um, Essentially, they see him as a dictator and an Islamist dictator at that. For the West, it's complex because for two reasons. Firstly, Turkey is needed in the fight against ISIS, which, as the attacks in Nice show, is a very grave reality. And secondly, Turkey has really been under enormous pressure from the refugee crisis from Syria. So if Western countries, if Britain, France, the US, were too hard on Turkey, Turkey might just say, for example, in the case of Europe, okay, why should we take all these refugees? We're not going to get into deals with. Actually, I mentioned France and Britain, with Germany especially, because of all the European countries. Well, actually, Italy's taken a lot of refugees as well. But the point is, Turkey has proportionally taken far more than any other country, and so, Turkey is a very important player in the region. Um, there is complex questions here. On one hand, technically, Erdogan is a democratically elected president, so the moral question is, for those of us who cannot stomach Islamism but also believe in democracy, this provokes a real moral maze. It's a bit like President Morsi in Egypt, the short-lived presidency of Morsi. What the situation now is in Egypt is Sisi is basically Mubarak Part 2. Um, Erdogan is basically the strongest or the most consequential Turkish leader since Kemal Ataturk, and that's no small statement. He's a very powerful individual, or at least I should maybe rephrase that and say a very influential figure. Apparently, there was calls from minarets across the country, especially in Istanbul, for Erdogan supporters to get to the streets. Now, apparently, that's unprecedented in Turkey. And although the country has had coups before, it has been 36 years now since the last one in 1980. So this is a major development tonight. I don't think it'll get as serious as civil war. I hope not. But the problem is in a country where the government does heavily censor the internet, and Turkey is just as bad as China in some ways when it comes to internet censorship, or at least Erdogan is. He's got a reputation for being super sensitive about his image, and Turkey's always had issues with censorship. For example, the concept of offending Turkishness um, has been seen to be a criminal offence. To what extent the legislation is there is a matter of debate, but Turkey does not have the same level of freedom of expression as some more liberal Western countries. By the same token, it's not Iran or Saudi Arabia, so we have to bear that in mind. But definitely, there has been a disturbing tendency for Erdogan to kind of try and foster this personality cult, and the man is he's a complete egomaniac. He is a personification of an egomaniac. My Turkish friend described him as an Islamofascist. Now, I'm not Turkish, I'm not on the ground. Perhaps I'm not in a position to say that, but I can definitely understand the concern in Turkey about Erdogan. Um, Having said that, if this is a real coup and it isn't set up by Erdogan, it's quite difficult to justify it. I mean, the TV station TRT, the female presenter, the blonde haired lady, was saying that she was forced to make the pro military broadcast by force. Now, if that's true, that's abhorrent, and no one can rationally condone that, no matter how much you may dislike Erdogan. If that is true, and I have to emphasize if it is true, that's not going to get wider support from anyone, not in Turkey and not outside Turkey, because Washington, London, Paris, and Berlin cannot be seen to be supporting that sort of coup. Um, no country would support it. Beijing and Moscow wouldn't support it either. Moscow, of course, has had strained relations with Turkey, but that has very, very recently been broadly patched up. Um, so yeah, it's still, this thing is still ongoing as I speak. But at the exact moment, it looks like if it was a coup, the coup has failed. It's too early to say whether that's a good or a bad thing. Obviously, when a country is in a state of instability, it's never good. It's never something to be welcomed. But Erdogan does need to be aware that if he continues down this path of authoritarianism, I think he's being complacent because he knows that Western countries basically need him right now. But look at the Arab Spring. Look at what's happened to numerous dictators in the region. Erdogan is going to need to start listening to concerns. Otherwise, there is going to be a mass uprising at some point, even bigger than the protests in 2013. So I don't have a great deal of sympathy with Erdogan. Um, but Turkey itself is a very, very important country. The reason I don't sympathise with Erdogan is because I believe some of his behaviour is a hallmark of a tin pot dictator, and Turkey doesn't need that. Turkey may not be joining the EU. That doesn't mean it should be looking eastwards. It doesn't mean it should be going down an Islamist path. And I can totally understand Turkish people being concerned about that. Very concerned. If you're a Turkish woman, if you're gay, um, there's all sorts of reasons to be concerned about the move towards Islamism. Now we have to put things in context. Turkey is not Saudi Arabia. Turkey is not Iran. Turkey is not Pakistan. Um, in many ways, it's still a very cosmopolitan society. That's my impression. And you don't get gangs of Islamists going around Turkey, wanting to stone people. It's not like that. I have been to Turkey once. Actually, I was in the resort where Erdogan was supposed to be initially, Marmaris, which is in the southeast of the country, southwest, excuse me. Um, I don't want to be too opinionated in this video because I'm not on the ground and it is a fluid situation, and I'm always very wary about these sort of developing situations to make too many opinions. But I do hope the situation gets resolved. Nobody can hope for an unstable situation. Even I'm sure those Turkish people who are very, very anti Erdogan don't want to see civil strife. I'm sure they don't want to see their country become another Syria. That would be hellish. The idea of a country as consequential as Turkey descending into civil war, it's already a very tense situation with the war that has really escalated with the PKK. 4,000 people at least killed in the past 2 years. That's really escalated. Terrorism is a major issue, numerous attacks in Istanbul. So Turkey is very, very fragile right now, very fragile. Um, and everyone should be hoping for a stable situation. But that isn't the same as sort of endorsing Erdogan's extremes. And I think if he doesn't start to moderate, he is going to reap what he sows, basically. That's common sense. So, final word, I don't want to see an unstable Turkey, but by the same token, I don't want to see Erdogan sort of, well, becoming a dictator. And, Turkey is a great nation. It doesn't deserve that. No nation deserves it, of course, but it would definitely be a step down a dark path. And I have a lot of sympathy with those secular Turks who are concerned about this. I have a lot of sympathy with them at the moment.